Welcome to Nature Revisited, the podcast. For those of you who are new to the podcast, my name is Stefan Van Norden. And thank you, everyone, for joining me on today's episode with Nadina Galle, The Nature of Our Cities. Nadina Galle is a Dutch-Canadian ecological engineer and a technologist whose work has been featured by the BBC Earth, Newsweek, and the National Geographic. She also produces the podcast, The Internet of Nature. In her new book, The Nature of Our Cities, Nadina writes that the future of urban life will depend on balancing the natural world and technology. So Nadina, who divides her time between Amsterdam and Toronto, two of the most beautiful cities, joins me to talk about how technology can make a real difference in our cities. Nadina, welcome to Nature Revisited. It's a pleasure having you on the podcast. It's not often that I get to talk with someone from the Netherlands. Your new book, The Nature of Our Cities, is about your journey to find answers or solutions to some of the more crucial problems that we face in our cities. What were some of the motivating questions that you asked yourself that led to that journey?
Well, Stefan, that's a great question. And thank you so much for having me on Nature Revisited. It's a pleasure to have this conversation with you. I would say some of the questions that I had was really twofold. On the one hand, we're seeing this massive rise in natural disasters and the increasing damage that we're having. And it often feels like in many of the cities that we're building and continue to retrofit to this day, we have lost nature's natural buffer. We're removing so much greenery and vegetation and nature that is there for a reason that is causing these issues like erosion. When we have issues like wildfire and we see this huge buildup of brush, which can be tinderbox for wildfires, we're seeing this massive increase in pavement and asphalt, resulting in stormwater that has nowhere to go. So I think on the one hand, I'm really inspired to motivate cities to design in a different way so that they can be resilient and have this buffer of, ironically, of nature to be able to withstand nature's power in these moments. But another huge motivator for me is the fact that we see longevity, lifespans, and health spans decreasing. We see that mental health is on the rise. And I would say there's a certain sense of hopelessness, of eco-anxiety, this idea that there's no excitement for the future. And much of that, I feel like, is an issue because we've lost our connection with nature. More and more of us live in cities. So if we can't create that sense of connection and nature in cities, then I think we're going to be in for real trouble. So that, I would say, are the two motivating issues and questions that I had before I started writing the book.
So what made you want to become an ecological engineer?
Yeah, ecological engineering is interesting. It's a relatively new discipline. It's been around for about 30 to 40 years, and it's really the art and the science of using nature's own methods to solve environmental problems. So working with ecosystems like wetlands or forests and use them to clean up pollution, manage water, or restore habitats. So it's kind of like working with nature to fix problems instead of against it. And that really in and of itself was the reason why I wanted to become an ecological engineer. I had tried my hand at many different disciplines, and I really felt like when I discovered ecological engineering, it all came full circle for me. Anywhere where you have neighbors, we are going to have this innate connection that we need to have with nature, and that in the most instances we need to restore with nature. And that is really at the heart of what an ecological engineer does, which is why I wanted to become one.
The Dutch have had a long history with the land, water, and technology. Do you think your Dutch background had an influence on the path that you have taken?
It's an interesting question. Yes, but not necessarily for the reasons one might expect. I was born in the Netherlands. My family and I moved to the States shortly after that. Growing up Dutch in Canada, I think offered me a unique perspective. I could compare my typical suburban neighborhood and upbringing, and I could compare that to my cousins' lives in the Netherlands. While there were many similarities, what stood out to me were the forests, parks, canals, and reservoirs in the Dutch landscape. And I felt Dutch neighborhoods seemed to prioritize nature more actively. In a lot of Dutch communities, instead of being an afterthought, nature was integrated into designs from the start, rather than first being destroyed and then reintroduced later. And that was something that was really inspiring to me. What it speaks to is humanity's intrinsic want and desire to be around nature. And I thought we might be able to use that style of development across the side of the pond.
Your podcast is called Internet of Nature, which is a phrase you have used to describe your work. When did you first start using it, and how would you define it?
I remember it very vividly. It was February of 2019, and I was invited to deliver a TEDx talk, and I had 1 month to prepare for it. For the first time, I was tasked with distilling my philosophy and ideas into one cohesive story. And I was doing my PhD at the time. Academia doesn't always force you to distill what it is exactly that you're working on and how you would translate that to a general audience. And it was really through the TEDx talk that I was challenged to do that for the very first time. It was during that process that I realized that my work needed a name. I had encountered numerous innovators using technology in a responsible, ethical, and exciting ways to enhance nature in cities. And I thought, yes, this needs a name. And I decided to coin their endeavor the Internet of Nature. And this title became the centerpiece for my TEDx talk, and then also the subject of the academic paper that I co-authored, and then the focus of my ongoing mission to spread its message and the innovators within it. Today, I would say the Internet of Nature is much the same as it was defined 5 years ago. It is a concept that parallels the idea of the Internet of Things, IoT, in the digital realm, but applies that to the natural world. It doesn't just use Internet of Things technology. It uses all kinds of emerging technologies to monitor, understand, enhance ecosystems and biodiversity in our urban environments. The Internet of Nature encompasses this whole range of different technologies, so sensors and data analytics, and artificial intelligence, communication networks. And I would say the best way to learn about them is through the stories of the innovators themselves. I've gotten the opportunity to document them through my podcast, and many of those and many others are also really at the heart of my book, The Nature of Our Cities. Many argue that nature and technology have absolutely no place being in the same sentence. I really want to work against this narrative. I want to swim against this current because I believe the natural world, especially in our cities, needs help. And we would be foolish to ignore this huge toolbox that we have available to us to be able to address a lot of those issues. And the Internet of Nature has really become this umbrella term for that philosophy. Throughout all of this, it's really important to me that I always maintain, and I say this many times throughout the book, and I say it through my presentations and the podcast, that I wholeheartedly believe that we need to maintain this philosophy of nature first and technology second. Everything that we use technology for is in the service of nature. Being able to use technology as an aid to help nature rather than as a replacement for it. And that is something that I really believe in.
So how can someone learn more?
Yeah, so I have my website, nadinagalle.com, NADINAGALLE.com. On that website, you'll find a whole host of resources about the Internet of Nature. There's a research there that links to the academic paper. You can also find a link there to the Internet of Nature podcast, which, as I mentioned before, is probably one of the best ways to learn about the different innovators. And then, of course, my book, The Nature of Our Cities, which is at its heart an exploration of who are the people behind this movement that is the Internet of Nature.
Your book looks at the major issues that are facing our cities and what some of the emerging technologies are doing to help. Can you share some of the stories and people who are making a difference?
Absolutely. I think one of my favorite examples is a woman named Puk van Dijk from Amsterdam. Puk van Dijk had a very nomadic childhood, lived in many different countries, and when it came time for her to settle and have a family of her own, she chose Amsterdam North. Amsterdam North is a neighborhood that is across the River Ij. It's physically quite separated from the rest of Amsterdam. There's ferries that go across to take you there. The Shell had its headquarters there. There were many shipyards. It was a labor-intensive neighborhood. And that, of course, like many cities that had an area like that, has undergone rapid development. And with that has brought issues like gentrification, loneliness, pollution, deforestation, rise in housing prices. And she saw these issues around her with her newfound neighbors, and she decided to interview them about it. She was walking home one day and she realized that many of these issues that her neighbors were discussing were parallel to the issues that actually a lot of trees in the north of Amsterdam were facing. And she decided to turn these stories, these interviews, into scripts that were read by local actors as if they were coming from a tree. She selected 6 of these talking trees, and each tree was sharing to listeners the plight that it was going through, whether that was loneliness, pollution, gentrification. She used a really interesting technology to make this happen called geolocated sound. Using that technology, she created something called an immersive audio experience. You went to the start location, you pressed play on an app in your phone, put your phone away, you put your headphones on, and for an hour and a half, you forgot the technology was even there. Based on this geolocated sound, you were actually told via the audio recording where to go. You would go on this hour and a half walking tour, and you would walk by these 6 talking trees. Many of the trees you would hear before you would actually see them. And then when you came close enough, these trees would tell you their stories. And what I think is so beautiful about this story is it is an incredible way to responsibly anthropomorphize trees in order to share their plight. Because this neighborhood is going through a lot of deforestation, it's helping to show humans the issues that trees face and why they're so important to have in our cities and what we can do to protect them. And secondly, I love the technology that's used in this, because technology is facilitating this interaction, but it's not distracting or taking away anything from it. It's just something that's really at the heart of the Internet of Nature, technologies that we can use that work in the background. And the third thing I'll say is that it's become incredibly effective as a tool for knowledge dissemination. It's not just about engaging the local residents and local citizens about what's happening with trees in their neighborhood. There was actually a city planner who mandated that this be mandatory listening for all urban planners within his division in the municipal government of Amsterdam. You could create a tour like this immersive audio experience in any city in the world, whether it's talking trees or whether it's a guided nature walk or shedding light on other natural elements that your city may have. It's a technology that I think is really effective in getting people to look at nature in their cities through a different lens. And that is so important, because if we do not reconnect people with the nature in their cities, there's no way that we can get people to take it seriously and advocate for it on a larger scale.
What are some of the other technologies that are helping to bring more trees to our cities, such as sensors?
There are a number of urban forestry and urban tree examples in this book. The reason being is that trees are really the most conspicuous element of urban nature in our cities. They're so incredibly important. They play a crucial role in improving air quality, reducing heat, managing stormwater, enhancing biodiversity, providing aesthetic value, but overall, I think are the public health benefits to communities. We're just at the cusp of understanding how important trees are to the public health and well-being of our communities, and they really dwarf all other benefits. They could really be seen as a public health intervention at this point. Some of the other technologies that I talk about are sensors, which I think are a really exciting one. What happens is that when we plant new trees in cities, it is critical that we think about the right place and the right time and the right tree to do so. But once we've answered those questions, it's critical that we think about what does that tree need in the soil. The soil is often a very misrepresented and undervalued resource that we have in our cities. If we don't ensure that our soil is healthy, we cannot expect our trees to create these big, bright, beautiful canopies that we require for all these ecosystem services that trees provide. What sensors do is when they're installed, they'll give you real-time information on when you need to water that tree, and probably most importantly, when you do not need to water it. We think often about when we plant trees, it's important that we water them at the right time. And that is crucial because a tree that gets the right amount of water at the right amount of time actually grows up to 3 times faster than a tree who isn't. More importantly, we are also dealing with issues that actually get too much water. So it's critical to make sure that they're getting the right amount of water at the right time. The sensors, they don't only tell us soil moisture content, they also tell us things like organic matter, the pH of the soil, the temperature of the soil. All of these give us really critical metrics into making sure that we can intervene in soil health for the benefit of that tree before we start seeing the damage to the tree. Because once we start seeing that damage to the tree, it's often too late to save it. Another technology I'll mention that I'm excited about is the idea of LiDAR. It is essentially a laser coming from a scanner on top of either a car or a backpack. And essentially it's measuring the distance from that scanner to whatever object it hits first, meaning that you're left with this 3D map of your surroundings. And many cities are using this technology now to be able to map their city's trees, a process which by foot could take years and years and is subject to much human error, not to mention that it takes so long, meaning that the first data that you collect is often outdated by the time that the whole data set is ready. But we can actually have tree inventories done within a matter of days rather than a matter of years and much more cost effectively. Once the digital map is made, we can use these algorithms to be able to decipher how big is the tree, how large is its crown, how big is the trunk, what condition is it in. Once we have that information, we can actually use that data to really challenge how we measure the success of urban forestry. We live in this era of million tree planting campaigns. We've become so obsessed with how many stems that we're putting into the ground each year that we've forgotten what matters is, are we having year over year canopy growth in our cities? Are we having more canopy than we did in the last year? And using this LiDAR mapping technology, that is actually something that we can measure. And because of that, we can change how urban forestry success is defined. Right now in city councils, tree success is seen as, did we plant more trees than were removed? But of course, this gives a completely skewed idea, because if you removed 100 large mature trees and then you went ahead and planted 101 new saplings, you have removed massive amounts of wildlife, stormwater filtration capacity, air quality. You've removed so much biomass and you've replaced it with so little. Unfortunately, right now on paper, that's still seen as a success. And using this LiDAR mapping technology, we actually have tools to be able to measure the canopy growth year over year and have that be our measure of success than just looking at stems alone.
In your book, you point out that 2 major challenges to our cities are heat and flooding. What are some of the technologies that are addressing these issues?
I am really excited in terms of flooding about what Adrian Benepe is doing at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. Adrian Benepe is the president of Brooklyn Botanic Garden in New York City. He was one of the front runners behind a technology called the Smart Water Garden. Together with a number of architects and computer scientists and other city planners, they designed the Smart Water Garden, which is essentially a beautiful reservoir of water, but it's designed really like a garden. You wouldn't even know what it's able to do. If you just went there on a clear, sunny day, you would have no idea what this Smart Water Garden is capable of. Essentially how it works is it looks with online weather data, and any time where it sees precipitation in the forecast, it goes ahead and it actually discharges a certain amount of water to the stormwater management system of New York in advance. So you're lowering the amount of water in the smart water garden, in the reservoir, so that you have more room for water that is projected to fall in the forecast. A beautiful example of public space that people can enjoy on clear, beautiful, sunny days, and it's life-saving in times of extreme precipitation. In terms of heat, one of the people that I'm really excited about in this space is Dr. Vivek Shardas. And what Vivek has done is he has revolutionized how we measure heat, and particularly hyperlocal measurements of heat in our cities. He founded a company called Kappa Strategies, spearheaded this movement called the Heat Watch campaign. It is a completely community science, citizen science mapping initiative that happens every year where they send low-cost sensors to volunteers. Those volunteers are asked to install the sensors either on their bikes or their cars and either drive or cycle a predetermined route multiple times a day for several days to map where there is excess heat in those communities. The reason why this is so revolutionary is an incredible way to engage citizens in this issue and create more advocacy for urban greening efforts. That the best way we had to do this before was through satellite measurements, which were incredibly granular. They didn't offer much insight into what extreme heat feels like on the street level. Having hyperlocal measurements is critical to being able to communicate that information to city councils so that they can target exactly where there need to be urban greening interventions, because urban greening is our best defense at lowering temperatures at the street level, in addition to having all of these other fantastic benefits.
So do you see the Dutch having a role as we see more cities like New Orleans facing increasing problems with storms and rising water levels?
I think there is a lot to learn in the Netherlands from its history of having to deal with these issues long before they become issues in other places. We've already seen massive Dutch involvement in the post-Hurricane Sandy response in New York City. There's also been a lot of Dutch architects that have been involved in New Orleans. But I will say it's not just expertise and not just technology like sensors, dams, and dikes that are really exciting in that area. But I think it's in a way that the Dutch have learned to communicate with each other, which is known as the polder model. The polder model comes from the Dutch word polder, which refers to the low-lying land reclaimed from bodies of water, typically through the use of dikes and drainage systems. But the term really symbolizes the collaborative approach of the Dutch in managing their waterways and their landscapes. It reflects this consensus-based process that's really involved in the model. Just as polders require the cooperation and collective effort to manage water levels and prevent flooding, that was something that you could not do unless you had collaboration amongst all stakeholders. And I think that's something that the rest of the world could really use from the Dutch. How can you use the polder model to increase collaboration among all the various stakeholders that we're going to need? Urban nature does not touch just one city department. Urban nature has an impact on flooding, on economics, on societal issues, on inclusion issues, on health issues, on climate change issues, on sustainability issues. Urban nature really has such an impact on all of these things. Right now, we have the Department of Parks and Recreation. Urban nature falls under that. But is that really fair when urban nature is having such an impact on all of these other departments? I think the polder model will become really crucial in this kind of newfound collaboration that we need to find amongst various stakeholders to make nature work in our cities.
In your book, you say that we have to change our way of thinking to make a successful and viable future. What are some of the other ways that we have to change our way of thinking?
I think we have to shift our perspective to view nature not as an obstacle, but as a valuable resource. And it's something that can be used to address a lot of the pressing economic, environmental, and social challenges that we're seeing. Because right now, urban nature has a cost associated with it for implementing it, planting it, maintaining it. There is cost associated with that. But right now, those maintenance costs are all coming towards one person, whether that's the homeowner, whether that's the homeowners association. But the benefits of that urban nature, whether it's a smart water garden, whether it's a tree, whether it's a pocket park, those benefits are being felt around the community. And that's a difficult accounting problem that we need to solve. And I would like to see the world's best economists help us understand how we can do a better job of that. Right now, we have a very, very difficult time understanding those costs and benefits on paper. And I think embracing these approaches requires a willingness to learn and acknowledging that nature has many of the answers, but we need to figure out a way to make it work in our current economic system. Because I believe inherently it is something that we can solve. We're just not quite there yet.
And how important are the emerging techno naturalists and citizen scientists to the new urban revolution?
Yeah, I would say the techno naturalists, the citizen scientists are everyday people and entrepreneurs who are using technology to contribute to scientific research and environmental conservation efforts. And they really at the heart of the Internet of Nature. I really see them as the cheerleaders of this movement, and without them, I think we would be nowhere. They really play a crucial role in participating in projects like the City Nature Challenge, for example, which I discuss at length in the book. The City Nature Challenge is an invitation to people all over the world. Over 700 cities took part, and it's 80,000 people in total. And that is growing every year. Initiatives set up by the California Academy of Sciences and the Los Angeles County Museum of Natural History. It's 4 days every year, inviting people to use the app iNaturalist to observe, identify, photograph, and upload as many observations as possible in this 4-day period. And it's really meant as this celebration of urban nature, this call to action to try and document as much urban biodiversity as possible within these 4 days. And it's been incredible to see it grow over the past 9 years that it's been around, starting from just 2 cities participating to over 700, seeing how many thousands of species have been identified and how many endangered or even thought to be extinct species. Like the city of La Paz, largest city in Bolivia, has actually won City Nature Challenge for the past 3 years. A high schooler actually rediscovered the Bolivian snake, which hadn't been seen in years. It was actually thought to be extinct in La Paz. In the same way, there was this endemic blueberry bush, which hadn't been reported since the early 1900s by researchers, was re-identified. And that really, I would say, is at the heart of one of my main goals with the Internet of Nature, which is having people establish that reconnection with nature, which I believe is inherent to everybody out there. They just sometimes need a little push, a little nudge to have that interaction take place. And this is a great way to make that happen.
While you were writing your book, you became a parent. What is your biggest concern when it comes to teaching your child about the difference between technology and nature?
That is correct. I found out I was pregnant just days after I signed my book deal. And it was incredible to be able to share this. And I really feel the book and the baby have become intrinsically linked for that reason. And it caused me to really change also the order of the chapters in this book. As I was preparing to become a parent, one of the big issues that is grasping up the hearts and the minds of many parents in this day and age is how can you ensure that your child is a digital native, because that is the world that we're growing up to, but at the same time spending the majority of their time outside and really understanding the primacy of nature. Understanding that while technology can provide valuable tools to enhance our understanding and care for the natural world, it's important to emphasize that nature itself is the ultimate wisdom and solutions. And I really want to instill this perspective into my child and instill and cultivate a deep respect for the environment and foster this mindset of stewardship. And now it really has become somewhat of a personal mission.
So what do you hope the reader will take away with them after reading your book?
I would hope that the reader takes away the idea that small doses of urban nature are just as crucial for our health and well-being as expansive wilderness areas. For the vast majority of people, it is the day-to-day interactions with nature, these daily doses of nature, And that is incredibly important, whether it's a nearby park for family outings or even just a view of the mountains from their office. I would really encourage all the readers, after reading this book, to step outside, discover what nature they have within even walking distance of their homes, and see what steps you might be able to take to enhance those spaces. These things are really important to our overall health and well-being, and it's crucial that we take care of these spaces, because if we don't use it, we lose it.
Where do you hope technology ultimately takes us in our relationships with nature?
I hope that we no longer notice the technology at work. I write about this in the epilogue of the book as well, but I hope someday we get to the point where technology helps us water newly planted trees, provides decision support on the most effective place to plant new natural interventions, offers us ways to contribute to biodiversity surveys and safe habitat for endangered species, and that they help us consciously protect and enhance nature with every new building and development. That technology supports our relationship with nature, but it never replaces us. And that someday we might not even notice it at work. That someday many of these technologies that I discuss in the book might even become obsolete. I think that our relationship with nature should always come first, and that technology offers a way to support us in caring for it. It will in no way ever replace the beauty of nature. It will always be a tool to help us enhance it.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Nadina Galle, and that you get the opportunity to read her new book, The Nature of Our Cities, and to listen to her podcast, The Internet of Nature. To learn more about the work that Nadina is doing, visit her website, nadinagalle.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with friends, family, and colleagues. You can follow Nature Revisited on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or our website, nordenproductions.com. I would also like to invite you to share your comments and ideas, and even suggestions for future guests for Nature Revisited on the comment section of this episode on our website. The music for Nature Revisited is Tim Buckley, Buzz and Fly. Nature Revisited is produced by Stefan Van Norden and Charles Gagan, and I hope you will join me for the next edition of Nature Revisited. And in the meantime, do remember, we are nature.